Darren, thank you for the time today, my man. Excited to dive into everything that you're doing with CourtsApp, but I want to start back at the beginning. Talk about the moment when you knew you wanted to get into the racket sports industry because initially started in real estate. So what was that like making that transition into this space?
Good question. I can't say it was a moment, but a friend of mine called and asked me if I'd interest in looking at the Port Washington Tennis Academy, pretty renowned facility in the New York area. It's actually where the McEnroes started playing in the late 60s, early 70s. And I went to look at it, frankly, just from a real estate standpoint, as a real estate investment. But looked at it, fell in love with it. At the time, it was 17 tennis courts. It was really needed a lot of, tender love and care to get it back to the facility that it was. It's actually the first tennis academy in the United States. So I ended up buying that and brought in a Sport Time to operate it. We then turned it into the John McEnroe Tennis Academy. And I'm like, damn, it's a lot more fun running a tennis academy and a pickleball facility. We ended up converting four tennis courts to 12 pickleball courts. So now it's 25 courts in total. I'm like, this is a lot more fun than collecting rent for office tenants, industrial, or, chasing down people who don't want to pay rent. And I fell in love with pickleball. I always loved tennis, but I fell in love with pickleball. It's not far from my home in New York. And I said, this is something I get my arms around. There's nothing better when you're passionate about a business and you can make a living doing it. And racket sports and now CourtsApp, affords me those things. So it's really fun. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have my days and it's nothing's easy. But that was really the touch off moment.
And when did CourtsApp come into the picture officially? Like when you started the company, what problem were you looking to solve, or that you noticed in the racket sports industry that you thought you could tackle?
So it happened about a year ago, early 2025. I was looking at numbers and analytics because now not only do we have Port Washington, but I have a series of investments in pickleball facilities. And I saw just the occupancy levels, were about 60% on average. Some days were 80, some days were 50. And there's a lot of seasonality in the racket sports business. And once again, coming from my real estate background, the goal and objective is 100% occupancy, right? A completely leased office building, a completely leased apartment building. And that's the goal and objective. And I just saw not only, in our facilities, but speaking to friends who have facilities around the country, there was a satisfaction level of 60%. But 60% means only 60% utilization, 40% vacancy. And I said, something has to give. And I did the research and found that, the majority of court time, even prime time hours are only about 80% utilized. And non-prime time hours are less than 20%, coming to somewhere between 50 and 60%. And I said, this is just wrong. It shouldn't happen this way, right? People play golf during the day, people ski during the day, people surf, bike ride, go for walks during the day. Why aren't they playing racket sports? And then I did further research and found out there's no aggregator, right? There's no platform that consumers are used to. Like right now, I use DoorDash, I use Uber, I use OpenTable, I use Expedia, right? I want to go to one place to search and discover and get price and availability for hotel rooms if I'm traveling, for airlines. Even though I use Delta and Marriott, I want to see what the options are because maybe there's a better flight or a cheaper flight. And there was no aggregator of racket sports. And the theoretical light bulb went off and said, listen, it's synergistic, to what I'm already doing. I know people and started CourtsApp to really be that one-stop shop where a player could come in and just find a court to play on, find an open play, find a tournament, in three easy clicks and check out and go.
I love it. Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, 60% occupancy, that seems like a pretty significant problem to solve for a lot of these facilities. So why do you think like no one has presented or tried to build a solution prior to CourtsApp?
I think, the technology has always been a challenge, right? The overall racket sports business, it's actually pretty amazing. It's one of the most fragmented businesses I've ever seen. right? There's like five or six big players in the entire country. But other than that, nobody owns more than 1% market share, right? So there's no Walmart, there's no Starbucks, there's no McDonald's where you have buying power, pricing power, and really branding. If you go across any given market, be it South Florida, New York, Chicago, it's owned by 20 different clubs, is owned by 18 different people, right? So no one has that bulk buying power. But what also happened, it was really technologically inferior to other businesses until about 5 years ago when really Court Reserve and Play by Point started getting out there and started digitizing, racket sports. It was really a pen and paper, right? You'd call the front desk and say, "Hey, it's Darren. I want to play at, 6 o'clock and give me a tennis court or give me a pickleball court." And they would write it down on the paper, you check in.
Hmm.
Until Court Reserve and Play by Point and a few others now came out there, they didn't have that technological advantage, right? Airlines have been using computers, hotels have been using computers. So until you had that computer infrastructure that enables syncing APIs that we could capture that data and then broadcast it on CourtsApp, it would have been very hard to do this years ago.
Yeah. Marketplaces are traditionally known as a very difficult businesses, the chicken and egg, traditional chicken and egg problem. How did talk about like the strategy or like tactically how did you guys go about doing that? Was it like onboarding the facilities and the courts at first and then getting users? Like what did that kind of look like behind the scenes?
Yeah, so foundationally, it was always about the real estate, hence, my background in real estate. So that made sense to me, right? You got to create inventory, right? Uber did not need to get people riding in cars until they had drivers of cars. And you have to do it around market density. So our focus has entirely been since day one, getting enough density in a geographic area. So we initially focused on the Northeast in the tri-state area. Right now, we have over 100 facilities, about 1,000 courts that we're onboarding to get them on the platform to control density. So the same way Uber started in San Francisco, they needed enough drivers there to concentrate and satisfy the consumer that if you want to get an Uber, you can get one, within a few minutes.
Yeah.
If they only had three drivers, it wasn't really compelling. So it's definitely a bit of a chicken and egg. In this situation, the foundational element is definitely getting enough courts and enough density that you give enough flexibility, enough options to the players. So we're still rounding that out. We had a little bit of a setback. We had a bunch of courts online, and one of our partners asked us to take those courts offline until we got a full API integration. So right now we have about 50 facilities online, a few hundred courts. Come April, May of this year, we'll have about 200 facilities and over 2,000 courts online, mostly concentrated in the Northeast. And then we're rolling down the Eastern Seaboard into Florida, and then we'll wrap around the country, through Texas, Arizona, and into California and up through Seattle.
Hmm. You mentioned a couple other platforms that are like Court Reserve, and I think Playtomic is another one globally. What differentiates Courts app from those platforms for the listener? And then also, are you guys looking to expand internationally with the platform as well?
So what differentiates us, we're a marketing platform, hence a marketplace,
Yeah.
right? Core Reserve, the leader is the best management software, along with Play by Point, Podplay, Playtomic, and a few others. The difference is they manage the inside four walls, right? So they do the pro shop inventory, they do personnel, they do accounting, they do court inventory, court maintenance. We don't do any of that. We take that data from them on their court availability and turn that into a marketplace that will take the court availability from Court Reserve, from Play by Point, from Podplay, and show that availability across a broad spectrum, right? So we're not managing the courts. We don't go in and ask for a subscription fee. We actually give our software to the clubs for free, and then we make a commission as we perform. So it's really performance based, same how Expedia and DoorDash operate as well. Where our job out there is to get the players, right? So we're really, really focused on finding the unique ways to get the players. And that happens through a combination. We're advertising on all the Google platforms, the Meta platforms, but then we have deep integrations with companies like Duper, like World Paddle Rating. with Hitch that we're embedding our technology. It's called a modal inside of their apps. So if you're on Duper, you'll be able to book a court on Duper and just play pickleball. And then we're also talking to a lot of the tennis platforms as well to integrate deeper. So with our technology, we're able to do a deeper dive because we're aggregating, right? It wouldn't make sense for Duper to have one pickleball facility because then they're just showing one. We think we're going to have them all, so we have a broad spectrum and can really broadcast, that information to the players out there.
Hmm. And then on the international piece, are you guys looking to expand outside of the US long term? Like that's the vision?
It's definitely the vision.
Yeah.
I don't know how quickly that happens, right? The US is quite large and now North America.
Yeah.
We just actually won last week the largest pickleball operator in Canada. So we'll be going, north across the border there. But Canada is, fairly easy. Obviously, there's certain, changes with tax law and different disclosures, but we'll go to Canada shortly, literally next month. Speaking to some people in Asia, right? Asia is booming right now with pickleball. Speaking to some people in Europe on, padel and tennis. But frankly, I think I'd rather have a partner in certain international markets,
Yeah.
right? I'm obviously quite fluent in English, but my other languages, I didn't do so well in high school in my Spanish class. So going internationally, I think culturally it would be better to have a partner on a foundational element and do this there. So we're talking to some people, but there's a lot to conquer in the US that I want to make sure we have our foundation set here, and then we'll look to go abroad.
Yeah, I want to shift a little bit and talk about the the trend or the hype around pickleball paddle. Like we're seeing over the past couple years, a lot of activity and interest. How much of this do you think is hype as opposed to like a structural shift in racket sports? Because racket sports, I mean, if we're being honest, have been around for hundreds of years. So kind of take us through that, or like your thoughts around why this shift is happening now and where the tailwinds are.
For sure. So listen, tennis has been around hundreds of years, right? I grew up playing tennis. I've been going to the US Open since my parents bought me my first Fila sweatsuit in like 1975. Watching McEnroe and Borg play and Connors and then Sampras. So I love tennis and I consider myself a tennis player. Tennis, there's courts, it's expensive, especially you live in urban areas like New York City. There's not that many facilities on a per capita basis. And tennis went through a little bit of a lull, if you will. It had, the hype and excitement out of the 70s, things calmed down. For some reason, COVID really re-energized the racket sports world. People want to get out, they want to have activity. The interesting part about playing tennis, right, when you couldn't stand within 10 to 15 feet of people is you're 80 feet apart from each other, so it really wasn't a problem.
Yeah.
You didn't have to play tennis with a mask, but if you want to play basketball, football, where they're, contact or collision sports, you needed that. So I think the phenomena of COVID really changed the dynamics of racket sports. And then comes pickleball, right? Pickleball is easy to play, right? My wife, who I love, I would not say she's the best athlete in the family, but she plays pickleball and she plays it well, and it looks like pickleball, right? On a tennis court, because of the large area, because of the speed of the ball, you can't just play that. Yet pickleball became very readily available to the average US person that they're playing a sport, they're moving, it's active, and it's fun, right? And you don't need a ton of lessons. You can literally take 3 to 5 lessons and you have some semblance of pickleball. Now, may not be a 5-0 player or be, ultra competitive. So I don't think there's any hype around pickleball. I think pickleball is real. It's here to stay. It's had tremendous growth that we're in the mid 20 millions or higher players. I think that's going to plateau, but that's any business, right? Every business can't grow at 50% a year over year. It's just, there's not enough people to sustain that. So I think pickleball is here. Um, paddle, depending on how you pronounce it. I think there's a lot of speculation and a lot of anticipation, and we'll see how that plays out. Because one, The reason pickleball courts have grown, right? You could play pickleball on a tennis court in some semblance. You just tape the lines. You could play pickleball on a gym floor, on a concrete, in a parking lot. When I drive through New York City, the schoolyards, people are literally going out with chalk and buying nets from Amazon or Pickleball Central and popping them up, and you got a pickleball court. You can't do that with padel, right? Padel is very defined. It needs to be 33 feet by 66 feet. You need to have glass walls in the cage, and you typically need 25 to 30-foot ceiling heights. So the physical limitations and the cost of expense, I think, is going to really slow down Padel growth. And the challenge of playing padel, you have to be an athlete, right? That ball moves quickly, the court is small, the ball flies off the paddle, and then, that ball goes by you. I played pickleball 3 or 4 times a week, and I played, padel a dozen times. Until you get the feel, like you want the ball to go by you in padel and catch it off the back wall,
Yeah.
right? That's not easy, right? You got to really get your sink down and play. So I think padel will be a sport. I don't think it will be anywhere near as popular as tennis or pickleball, but I think it will sustain itself in the 5 to 10 million range, and people will play it. But I think the frequency of play and the same reason certain sports, right? Basketball and soccer. The reason why they're the most widely adapted sports is it's cheap and easy,
Yep.
right? Soccer, you just need a ball and a piece of earth, right? Basketball, you just need a ball and a hoop,
Yep.
right? The other sports have the physical limitations, both from a physical standpoint and an expense standpoint,
Yep.
right? There's a reason why skiing and golf aren't that popular because it's expensive and hard to come by. And I think padel will have similar challenges, although it'll be a very popular sport and loved by, many Americans.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful context. And when you look at the entire, racket sports business ecosystem, if you will, are there any sectors of it that you feel are undervalued, whether like the youth sports side or the facilities or the technological infrastructure? Like, where do you see the biggest opportunity, let's say over the next like 5 to 10 years?
So I think technology, I'll go backwards. So technology, I think yes, right? Companies like CourtsApp, right? So what we're doing is leaps and bounds beyond what anyone has ever seen, right? So CourtsApp is just phase one. We're introducing, Hey Courtney, right? Hence the word court in Courtney. We're introducing Hey Courtney. Hey Courtney is our AI court concierge. So the same way you talk to Siri or you talk to Alexa, you're going to be able to talk to Courtney and book a court through our platform and through other licensed platforms. We're also integrating with the LLMs. So you'll be able to go right into ChatGPT, right into Claude, and say, I want to book a tennis court in New York City tomorrow at 4 o'clock, and it will show you the courts app availabilities. We're spending the money, we have the foresight, we have the resources to take racket sports to the next level and help players get on the court and help the facility owners rent the courts. So I think technology, as it's evolving, especially with AI, we're very well positioned to execute upon that. When you look at the other sports, as far as adoption, I think it's going to take some time to get there with certain sports in certain locations and certain geographies, right? The biggest one being urban areas, right? The country has become clustered around the major metro markets, but those major metro markets create barriers of entry. One, because the real estate is expensive, and two, because the real estate has limitations, right? If you want a tennis court, it needs to be 120 feet by 60 feet wide with 40-foot ceiling heights. That's not typical,
Yeah.
right? It's expensive to build because of the columns. Same challenge with, padel, as we said earlier.
Mhm.
So I think certain things will take a little bit longer to catch on. I think the biggest opportunity is youth sports, right? As I said, earlier, we have partners with John McEnroe and operate the John McEnroe Tennis Academy, and we literally have thousands of kids playing youth tennis, right? But youth tennis is mature, right? There's the juniors, there's U17, then you get college scholarships. It's even in the Olympics, right? Pickleball has not gotten there yet, and neither has padel. But I think the biggest opportunity and where facilities will flourish is when they really nurture the children to get kids playing. We have kids playing tennis at 5 years old in red ball, and then they go to orange ball and yellow ball ultimately. That's starting to happen in pickleball, but it's going to take a while to fill those gaps in. But I think if I would invest money anywhere in the spectrum, it
Yeah.
would be the technology side where obviously I put my money where my mouth is and the youth side. Because if you're able to get the kids on the courts, right, it fills in those hours because they don't typically work. They go to school and end school at 2:30, 3 o'clock. So it helps fill that void hour. And then as they get older, they fall in love with the sport and get better.
Mhm.
So I think it's going to take a few years to get there, but youth sports is definitely the way to go and the programming around youth sports.
Yeah, for sure. Obviously you've been an entrepreneur in business for a long time. Getting into sports, what would you say is the most challenging aspect about the sports tech ecosystem as opposed to maybe traditional technology that people might not understand or see?
I think the sophistication level of a sports and facility owner is not the same as a typical business. My background's real estate, as you know, right? Real estate business is very, very analytical, right? You know every square foot, you know your cost of occupancy, you know your utilization, you know your free rent periods, you know your amenity packages as it correlates to your rent. The racket sports business, I think it's really been built on the fly, right? Our court time is $50 an hour. It's $50 an hour Monday to Friday. It's $50 an hour on the weekends. It's $50 an hour on the weekdays in the winter, right? That's not the way consumers operate, right? If you look at the airline industry and the technological advance of the airline industry, obviously peak fares are more expensive around holidays or weekends than they are on Tuesdays and Wednesdays. So we, CourtsApp, are building the dynamic pricing tools in so people understand that there's a supply and demand, economic equilibrium that they should price their courts differently,
Mhm.
right? Your court in the middle of the summer on Wednesday at 2 o'clock cannot be the same price on a winter evening at 7 o'clock, right? But I don't think the tools haven't been there and the forethought hasn't been there because a lot of people got into the sports industry um, because they love the sport, right? But they don't realize loving the sport is not the same as operating the facility from a prudent standpoint of how you maximize profitability, right?
Mhm.
Like I love what I do and I only work, to make money, but I only make money if I'm having fun, right? That's my modus operandi. A lot of people got into sports business, and right now I'm hearing from a lot of people who got into pickleball business. Oh, I love pickleball. Oh, I opened a 10-court facility. How do I get people here? Like, I just thought I'd open the door and it's the old, field of dreams, build it, they will come.
Yeah.
That's not the reality, right? You got to be out there marketing. Consumers have a lot of choices and a lot of availability of what they do with their free time and what they do with their disposable income. You want to get them on your courts playing, and it shouldn't be that hard. It's healthy, it's fun, and it keeps you alive longer, right? We've seen the
Yeah.
stats out there. You live 9.7 years longer if you play racket sports. Why wouldn't you play racket sports if you can? You got to know the courts are there. You got to know the availability, and that's really what we're fostering.
Yeah, Darren, no, this has been amazing. Last question before we wrap up. Uh, what does ultimately success look like for CourtsApp? Like, does it look like millions of users? Is it deep integration with every facility out there? Like, what would you deem to be success for the platform long term?
I think the fundamental element of success is growing the games, right? Growing the game of tennis, right? Growing the game of pickleball, growing the game of padel, badminton, etc. The more people we get to play and the more frequently they play, that would be successful, right? What does that correlate to? Yes, I would like to have millions of users using us. I would like to have 50,000 courts or more. And I think that gives us the player profile density and the court availability density and create a marketplace that people are enjoying it. We're also integrating not just court time, but we're rolling out open play and open match, tournaments, lessons, a pro shop, and then we're going to build a light social network, right? One of the bigger challenges out there is people can't find people to play with,
Yeah.
right? So if I want to play and it's, what time is it now? 4:50 New York time, right? If I want to play at 5 o'clock, I don't just have a bunch of friends sitting around waiting for me. So we're going to develop a light social network that say I'm a 4-0 pickleball player who could play with me at 5:30 and just talk to friends and make that communication easier. It won't be quite, Tinder or Hinge. We'll get you on the court having fun and meeting people who are like-minded who want to enjoy the sports.
Love it. Darren, where can people find out more about you, but also check out CourtsApp?
I mean, CourtsApp is easy. It's courtsapp.com. We're on the Apple Store or Google Play Store. And if you want to check me out, I don't know why you would, but you go on LinkedIn under Daren Hornig. I'm fortunately responsive. And listen, the end of the day, I like working. I like having fun. I like building the games we love. And love talking to people like yourself who are passionate about it like I am.
Thank you, Darren. Appreciate the time, man. Keep up the great work.
Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.